Christmas Eve hit different that year. Like the air itself knew something messy was about to pop off. I'm Marilyn Hayes, 72, widowed, living in the same sun-warmed coastal Georgia house my late husband built his whole life around. The kind of place that still smells faintly like cedar and coffee no matter how many candles you light. I used to think a home was just wood and paint and a mortgage you finally finish paying if you live long enough. Turns out, it's also the last thing people try to take from you when they think you're old and soft and too tired to fight. My son Ethan didn't always act like a stranger, but marriage can do weird things, and in his case, it wasn't marriage, it was Kendra. Kendra had a smile that looked sweet on Instagram and sharp in real life. She was the kind of woman who'd compliment your necklace while mentally pricing your entire living room. The first time she walked into my house after they got engaged, she didn't say wow or this is cozy. She said, this place has potential, like my home was a flip. After they married, she started calling me Mama Marilyn in public and Marilyn when she wanted something, and what she wanted, more than anything, was my house. Not because she loved family gatherings or wanted her future kids to run barefoot in my backyard. Nah, she wanted the equity, the location, the bragging rights, the control. It started small, like everything toxic does. We're paying too much rent, Mom. The market's crazy, Mom. Wouldn't it make sense to sell while prices are up? Ethan would say it the way he says everything now, half apologetic, half scripted, like he was reading lines Kendra wrote on the ride over. Then Kendra would chime in like a backup singer. We just want what's best for you, which always translated to, we want what's best for us. I didn't budge. I'd spent 10 years learning how to be alone after my husband passed. Learning how to fix a leaky sink and file taxes and sleep in a bed that suddenly felt too big. I wasn't about to hand over the one thing that still felt like mine. The day I realized it wasn't just pressure, it was a plan, was the day I accidentally dropped my phone. That's what Ethan thought. Anyway, it was a Wednesday afternoon, 3 weeks before Christmas, and Kendra had insisted on picking me up for lunch. She acted all excited, like we were girlfriends, like we had a cute little bond. I should have known better because Kendra doesn't do anything without a motive. We went to this trendy cafe downtown where the chairs are uncomfortable on purpose and the menu looks like a poem. Halfway through, Kendra said she needed to use the restroom, then looked at Ethan and gave him that little eye flick she does when she's handing out assignments. Ethan followed her. Not subtle at all. I sat there alone, stirring coffee that tasted like burnt regret. And that's when Ethan's phone started buzzing on the table because he'd left it like a rookie. I didn't touch it at first. I'm not a snooper. I'm also not stupid. The screen lit up again. Mortgage broker confirmed. If she sells, we can roll it into the down payment and still have cash. Another buzz. Tell him to keep her calm. She gets emotional. Don't let her spiral. Then, Christmas Eve dinner at her place is perfect. She's sentimental then. The message thread name wasn't Ethan's friend or coworker. It was Kendra Dad. My stomach did this slow, ugly drop. I stared at those words until they blurred, and that's when my hand bumped my own phone and it slid right off the table onto the floor. People turned. A barista asked if I was okay, and I laughed like it was nothing. I'm fine. Just Butterfingers, I said, playing sweet. But inside, something clicked into place like a lock. This wasn't family talk. This was strategy. I picked up my phone and pretended to check for cracks while my mind went into that calm, cold mode you get when you stop hoping people will be decent and start preparing for them to be exactly who they are. When Ethan and Kendra came back, Kendra was smiling too hard, like she'd just sealed a deal in there. Everything okay, Mama Marilyn? She asked, voice dripping, honey. Perfect, I said, smiling right back. Because sometimes the best move is letting someone think you're clueless while you quietly line up the receipts. That night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went digging, not through their things, but through my own life. I pulled out my deed, my will, my insurance docs, every paper that proved I owned what I owned. I printed copies and put the originals in a fireproof lockbox. Then I went through the bank transfers from the past year. Ethan used to be proud, independent. Now there were these small requests that weren't small at all. $2,000 for car repairs, $5,500 for tuition, $8,000 for a surprise opportunity. All funneled through Ethan, always with Kendra's language in the texts. I didn't have to guess whose idea it was. I screenshotted everything and sent it to an email Kendra didn't know existed one. I'd made years ago when my grandkids set up my tablet and told me Grandma always have a backup. Then I called my friend Loretta, who's retired from real estate and nosy in the most useful way. Loretta didn't gasp or clutch pearls. She said, "Baby, that girl is running a whole operation," and I swear she sounded impressed. She told me about elder exploitation, about how people use emotional pressure to get assets signed over. I said, "I'm not senile, Loretta." She said, "I know you're not. That's why you need to move smart." Move smart. I liked that. So I did. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched. I listened. I stopped reacting. Ethan would call and sound rehearsed. "Mom, we're just worried about you being alone." I'd say, "That's sweet." Kendra would text me links to condos. I'd respond with a thumbs up emoji like a harmless old lady. Meanwhile, I started building my own little file. Not a diary. Evidence. One Sunday, they came over unannounced. Kendra walked straight into my living room like she owned it, sat on my couch, kicked off her shoes, and started talking about renovations she'd been thinking about. She described knocking down my dining room wall, turning my guest room into a nursery, freshening up my kitchen. Then she said, "Real casual. And of course, we could turn the downstairs office into your space." My space. Like I was the guest. Like I'd be tucked away downstairs while they played house upstairs in the home I paid for. I smiled and said, "Oh, that's interesting," while my insides turned to ice. Ethan didn't even look up. He just nodded like it was normal. That's when I knew this wasn't just Kendra being pushy. Ethan was already halfway convinced. That's the part that hurt, not the greed, the betrayal. The way your own kid can look at you like you're an obstacle instead of a mother. Still, I didn't blow up. I didn't call her names. I didn't cry. Because people like Kendra feed on emotion. They twist it, weaponize it, tell everyone you're unstable. Nah, I was going to be calm. Dead calm. And I was going to set a trap so clean she couldn't wiggle out of it. The idea came to me when Loretta mentioned, offhand, "She's probably already talking to movers." Movers? That word hit me because it meant they weren't just dreaming. They were planning logistics. So I waited for the next mistake. It came fast. 2 days later, Kendra texted me from Ethan's phone by accident. I could tell because it wasn't Ethan's usual dry style. It said, "Hey Marilyn, just confirming you'll be home Christmas Eve around 6, right? Need to talk about house stuff in person. It'll be easier." Easier. Like I was a problem to manage. I replied, "Yes, sweetheart, 6 works. Can't wait." Then I took that screenshot and printed it, too. At that point, I made the envelope, a thick manila one, the kind you can't pretend is empty. Inside I put copies of everything. The texts, the bank transfers, the condo links. A little timeline I typed up like a mini case file. I added one more thing that felt dramatic but necessary. A letter to Ethan. Not a guilt trip, not a lecture, just the truth. I wrote, "If you're reading this, it means you finally stopped long enough to look at what's been happening. I love you. That hasn't changed. But love doesn't mean I let you get played, and it doesn't mean I hand over my life's work to someone who sees me as a stepping stone." I sealed the envelope, wrote for Ethan on it, and hid it in the drawer beside my favorite chair. Then I did something that surprised even me. I bought Ethan a car. Not brand new, not flashy rich, but a clean used Lexus with low miles. The kind he'd always wanted when he was younger but never bought for himself because he was being responsible. I had the savings. My husband and I had built it brick by brick, dollar by dollar, and I hadn't spent much on myself since he passed. Why buy him a car if I suspected he was part of the scheme? because I needed one last moment where Ethan remembered who I was to him before Kendra rewired his brain. I needed to crack the spell. And if I'm being real, part of me still wanted to feel like a mom giving her son something special. One more time, before everything went to hell. I also bought Kendra a gift, because I'm petty but strategic. A designer wallet, not a bag, not jewelry, just enough to make her eyes light up and her guard drop. I wrapped both gifts like I was trying to win Mother-in-Law of the Year. Fancy paper, satin ribbon, cute little tags. I wanted Kendra to think I was still playing nice. The week leading up to Christmas Eve felt like acting in a play where only I knew the ending. I decorated the tree with ornaments from the old days, the ones Ethan used to love. The little clay reindeer he made in 3rd grade, the glass angel my husband bought the year Ethan left for college, the tiny boat ornament from our first family beach trip. Every ornament felt like a memory and a bruise at the same time. I cooked in advance, too, because if this was going to be war, I was going to serve it with mashed potatoes and perfect gravy. On the night before Christmas Eve, I barely slept. I kept thinking, what if I'm wrong? What if Kendra is just intense and I'm overreacting? Then I'd remember the messages, the planning, the way she talked about my house like it was inventory, and my brain would go, nope, you're not crazy. You're finally awake. Around 2 a.m., I got up, walked to the living room, and opened the drawer to make sure the envelope was still there. It was. Heavy. Solid. Truth doesn't weigh nothing. I held it like a brick, then put it back and sat in my chair in the dark. I looked at the Christmas tree lights blinking soft and innocent, like they didn't know the kind of betrayal that could sit right under them. I whispered to my husband's memory, I'm about to do something that might cost me my son. And in my head, I heard him clear as day, that blunt loving voice, then do it anyway. Protect him, even if he hates you for it. Christmas Eve morning came warm and bright, the kind of southern winter day that feels like the world is lying to you. I made coffee, sat on my back steps, and watched the sunrise hit my backyard fence. Birds chirped like everything was normal. I let myself feel sad for about 5 minutes, then I stood up and started moving, like a woman with a plan. I cooked all day, turkey, cornbread dressing, green beans with bacon, sweet potatoes, rolls that actually rose like they were supposed to. I set the table with the good china and the silverware. My husband insisted we keep for special occasions. If this wasn't a special occasion, I didn't know what was. I put the wrapped Lexus key box under the tree and set Kendra's wallet gift beside it. Then I walked over to my chair and checked the envelope again, because I'm not trusting fate with something this important. Still there, still waiting. By 5:45, I'd changed into a nice sweater and lipstick, the kind I wear when I want people to remember I'm not fragile. I heard their car pull up at exactly 6 o'clock. Of course Kendra would arrive on the dot. Control freaks love the clock. I opened the door before they could knock, because I wasn't giving them the power of making me answer to them. Ethan stood there holding a bottle of wine, smiling like he wasn't sure what version of me he'd get. He looked tired. Older than his years. He hugged me, but it was quick, like he was worried Kendra would side-eye him for being too affectionate. Then Kendra stepped up behind him, phone in hand, perfect hair, perfect coat, perfect little smirk, like she already owned the night. "Merry Christmas, Marilyn," she said, eyes flicking past me into my house. Scanning, always scanning. "Merry Christmas," I said, sweet as pie. "Come on in. Dinner's ready." And right then, as they walked into my home, I felt something I didn't expect. Not fear, not dread. Clarity, because the second Kendra crossed my threshold, she thought she was walking into a negotiation. She had no clue she was walking into a courtroom. And I was the judge, the jury, and the woman who finally decided she was done being played. Part 1 ends here, with them stepping inside, the gifts under the tree, the evidence in the drawer, and me smiling like everything's fine. While my heart counts down to the moment I pull that envelope out and change all of our lives in one swing. The moment they stepped inside, the house felt tighter, like the walls leaned in to listen. Ethan took off his shoes the way he always had, lining them up neatly by the door without thinking. Muscle memory. Proof that this place was still, at least on some level, home to him. Kendra, on the other hand, didn't even glance down. She stepped right over the mat in her heels, slow and deliberate, eyes already doing inventory. The tree, the gifts, the table set too nicely for a casual dinner. I clocked it all. She noticed everything, because people who plan to take something always study it first. Smells amazing, Ethan said, genuine, and for a split second I saw my boy again. The kid who used to sneak spoonfuls of stuffing before dinner and swear it didn't count. Sit, I said, gesturing toward the living room. Dinner's just about ready. Kendra didn't sit. She drifted. Fingers grazing the back of my couch. Eyes on the framed photos like she was already deciding which ones stayed and which ones went into a box labeled miscellaneous. She stopped in front of the mantel where my husband's photo sat. She tilted her head. You never updated this, she said lightly. It's been years. I met her gaze. Some things don't need updating. She smiled thinly and turned away. Strike one. We ate, and on the surface it looked like a Norman Rockwell painting if you didn't listen too closely. Ethan praised the food, asked about my neighbor, laughed at an old story about his high school football coach. Kendra mostly picked at her plate, phone face down but never far from her hand. Every few minutes, she'd drop little comments like breadcrumbs. So, Marilyn, she said at one point, dabbing her mouth, have you thought any more about downsizing? I mean, keeping a place this big must be exhausting. I took a sip of water. I manage. Ethan shifted in his chair. Kendra just worries about you, Mom. I smiled at him. I know. What I didn't say was she worries about my square footage and my equity. People like Kendra hide greed under concern. It's their favorite disguise. After dinner, I cleared the plates myself before she could jump up and help. I didn't want her snooping around my kitchen drawers, not yet. When I came back in, Kendra was already crouched by the tree, pretending to straighten the gifts. Oh, these are from you? She asked, eyes lighting up when she saw the tags. Yes, I said. Why don't we do gifts now? Feels right. Ethan looked surprised. Already, Christmas Eve, I said. No rules. Kendra didn't argue. Of course she didn't. She loved control, but she loved rewards more. I handed Ethan the small box first. He shook it, laughed. Keys, he guessed. Open it. When he did, and the Lexus logo stared back at him, his face actually fell open. Mom, no way. Are you serious? Dead serious. He stood up and hugged me, tight this time, no hesitation. You didn't have to do this, he said, voice thick. I wanted to, and I meant that part. Whatever happened next, this was real. Kendra watched the whole thing, eyes sharp, calculating. When I handed her the slim, elegant box, her smile was immediate. Automatic. You're too much, she said, opening it. The wallet was exactly her style. Her fingers lingered on it a second too long. Oh wow, she breathed. This is gorgeous. I'm glad you like it. She did, I could tell, and just like that, her shoulders relaxed, guard down, strike two, right where I wanted it. They sat back down, glowing in their own ways. Ethan from gratitude, Kendra from satisfaction. And that's when I stood up and said, casually, like I was asking about dessert, Ethan, sweetheart, can you grab the envelope from the drawer next to my chair? The room changed. Ethan froze. What envelope? The one with your name on it. Kendra's smile twitched. Just a hair. She glanced at Ethan, then at me. What's this about? Family stuff, I said. Private. Ethan hesitated, then stood and walked to the chair. He opened the drawer, pulled out the thick manila envelope, frowned at the weight of it. Mom, he said. Sit, I said. Same tone I used when he was 10 and about to do something dumb. He sat. Kendra leaned forward, already reaching for the envelope. I lifted a finger. Not for you. Her hand stopped midair. Ethan slid a finger under the flap and started pulling out papers. I watched his face change as he read. Confusion first, then recognition, then something darker. "What is this?" he asked, voice low. "Read it," I said. "All of it." He did. The bank transfers, the texts, the screenshots, the timeline. His jaw tightened with every page. Kendra's patience snapped. "Okay, this is ridiculous," she said sharply. "Why are you digging through old messages like some paranoid?" "Stop," Ethan said, not looking up. That one word hit harder than any yelling could have. She stared at him, shocked. "What did you just say to me?" she demanded. I said stop. Silence fell heavy. He looked at me. "Is this real?" "Every word," I said. I didn't want to believe it either. Kendra stood up fast, chair scraping. "This is insane. You're letting her manipulate you." Ethan finally looked at her. "You told your dad we'd use my mom's house for a down payment." Her mouth opened, then closed. I was brainstorming. "You told him to keep me calm so I wouldn't spiral," he continued, voice shaking. "You planned this around Christmas, because she's sentimental." I saw it then. The crack, the spell breaking. "You went through my phone." Kendra snapped at me. "You left it on the table," I replied. "I read what popped up." "That's on you." She turned back to Ethan, switching tactics instantly. Tears, voice soft. "Baby, you know I only want what's best for us. For our future. Our future doesn't include taking my mom's house behind her back," he said. "She's alone," Kendra shot back. "That place is wasted on her." That was it. Ethan stood. "Get your coat." "What?" "We're leaving." She laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "You can't be serious." "I am." She looked at me like I'd slapped her. "You did this." "No," I said calmly. "You did." Ethan didn't wait. He walked to the door. After a long, burning stare, Kendra grabbed her purse and followed, heels angry against my floor. At the door, she turned one last time. "This isn't over." I smiled. "For me, it is." The door closed behind them, and the house went quiet in that deep, echoing way it only does after something irreversible. I stood there, heart pounding, hands steady. I had no idea if Ethan would come back tomorrow, or ever, but I knew one thing for sure. They would never take my home. And Kendra would never run my life again. The silence after the door shut was loud enough to ring in my ears. I stood there in the entryway for a full minute, staring at the wood grain like it might blink back at me. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. I'd spent weeks bracing for this moment, and now that it had finally happened, my body felt steady, heavy, yeah, sad, absolutely, but not broken. I walked back into the living room and sat in my chair, the same one my husband used to claim every evening like it was his throne. The Christmas tree lights blinked on and off, soft and patient, like they didn't care that a whole family dynamic had just imploded beneath them. I let myself cry then. Quiet, no sobbing, just tears sliding down because holding them back felt pointless now. About 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Ethan." I didn't answer right away. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because I needed him to sit with what he'd seen without me cushioning it. Mothers do that too much. We soften reality until our kids never fully feel the impact of their own choices. The phone buzzed again. Then again. Finally I picked up. "Mom," he said, voice raw. "I didn't know. I swear to you. I didn't see it like that." "I believe you," I said, "and I meant it." "She said you were trying to control me," he continued. "That you'd guilt me if I didn't go along with things. She said you'd make me choose." I closed my eyes. And now I see she was the one doing that. We sat in silence for a beat. "I messed up," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied. "You did. Not cruel, just honest." "I don't know what to do," he admitted. "For tonight," I said. "Go home, get some sleep. Don't argue. Don't apologize to her to keep the peace. Just breathe. And tomorrow, we talk." He exhaled shakily. "Okay." When we hung up, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired in a deep bone-level way. The kind of tired you get when you've finally stopped lying to yourself. Christmas Day came and went quietly. No big family dinner. No forced cheer. I spent it with Loretta and her sister, both of whom pretended not to notice how swollen my eyes were. They let me talk when I wanted and shut up when I didn't. Real friends know when to do both. 3 days later, Ethan showed up alone. No text, no call. Just his car in the driveway and a knock that sounded like it hurt him to make. I opened the door and stepped aside without a word. He walked in slowly, like he wasn't sure he was still welcome. He sat on the edge of the couch instead of sinking into it like he used to. "She moved out," he said. I nodded. I'd guessed as much. "She's staying with her parents," he added. "She told them you're manipulative. That you turned me against her." I figured. "She wants me to sell the house," he said, rubbing his face. "Says we need the money to start fresh." "And what do you want?" I asked. He looked up at me, eyes tired but clearer than I'd seen in a long time. "I want to slow down. I want to think for myself again." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "That's a good place to start." Over the next few weeks, the truth came out in layers. Little things Ethan hadn't questioned before suddenly made sense. The way Kendra always framed her wants as we. The way she isolated him from friends she didn't like. The way she talked about my house like it was already hers. And Kendra didn't go quietly. She texted me paragraphs accusing me of ruining her marriage. She left voicemails telling me I'd crossed a line. She even showed up once, unannounced, pounding on my door like she owned the place. I didn't open it. Instead, I called my lawyer. Because here's the thing people like Kendra never understand. Quiet women aren't weak. We're observant. And once we decide we're done, we don't scream, we document. A cease and desist letter shut her up real fast. Ethan started therapy. Real therapy, not the buzzword stuff Kendra liked to throw around. The kind where you unpack why it was so easy to hand someone else the steering wheel. One evening, months later, we sat on my back steps watching the sun go down. He looked at the yard, the fence his dad built, the old oak tree. "She wanted this place more than she wanted me," he said. "That's not your fault," I replied. "But it is your responsibility to notice next time." He nodded. "I will." Life didn't magically snap back to how it was before. It never does. But it grew into something sturdier, more honest. And as for me, I stayed right where I was. In my house. In my chair. In my life. I learned something important through all of this. Being kind doesn't mean being available for exploitation. Loving your child doesn't mean sacrificing your dignity. And getting older doesn't mean giving up your power. Sometimes, payback isn't loud or flashy. Sometimes it's simply refusing to be moved. And that kind of payback lasts the longest. By February, the town had opinions. That's how you know something real happened. When people who never asked about your life before suddenly just wanted to check in. The grocery store cashier who lingered a little too long. The neighbor who waved like normal but leaned in closer when she spoke. Small town curiosity wrapped in concern. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't explain myself. I learned a long time ago that people who want gossip will twist the truth no matter how carefully you hand it to them. And honestly, I didn't owe anyone a press release about my family falling apart. Ethan, on the other hand, was struggling in ways he didn't expect. When Kendra left, she didn't just take her clothes. She took the version of himself he'd been pretending to be. The confident husband. The future-focused guy with a 5-year plan and matching throw pillows. What she left behind was a man who suddenly had to sit alone with his own thoughts. That messes with you. He started coming by more often. Not to ask for money. Not to fix things, just to sit. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. One afternoon, he stared at the wall for a long time and said, "She made me feel like everything before her was temporary. Like my life didn't start until I met her." I nodded. That's how control works. They erase your past so they can own your future. He swallowed. Why didn't I see it? I didn't answer right away. Because you loved her, I finally said. And because you trusted yourself less than you trusted her. That one landed hard. Kendra didn't disappear quietly. She couldn't. Women like her don't fade out, they pivot. She started calling Ethan again, softer this time. Apologetic, reflective, talking about therapy, about growth, about how she was finally seeing her patterns. I watched Ethan read those texts with a familiar tightness in his jaw. She sounds different, he said once. She sounds strategic. I replied. He didn't argue. Then came the letter. Not to Ethan, to me. Handwritten. Flowery. Full of words like misunderstanding, emotions, family healing. She apologized for coming on too strong and said she hoped we could start fresh as women. I read it once, then again. Then I shredded it. Because apologies that skip accountability aren't apologies. They're fishing lines. 2 weeks later, my lawyer called. Marilyn, she said, I want to give you a heads up about. I asked, already bracing. Kendra filed a complaint. Claims you emotionally manipulated Ethan and interfered in her marriage. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. She's requesting mediation, my lawyer continued. And potentially damages. For what? I asked. Hurt feelings, essentially, she said. But don't worry, it's thin. Very thin. Still, it rattled me more than I expected. Not because I was afraid of losing, but because I was tired. Tired of being the villain in someone else's story because I refused to be convenient. Ethan took it harder. She's trying to scare you, he said angrily when I told him. This is my fault. No, I corrected gently. This is the consequence of her not getting what she wanted. He clenched his fists. I should have shut this down sooner. You did shut it down, I said. You're just not used to people pushing back after you say no. The mediation never went anywhere. Kendra showed up polished and teary, telling a story that painted her as the misunderstood wife and me as the cold, controlling mother. The mediator listened politely. My lawyer slid evidence across the table. Texts, timelines, financial records. The room shifted. Kendra's voice got sharper, defensive, and just like that, the mask cracked again. She withdrew the complaint 2 days later. No apology, no closure, just silence. Ethan filed for divorce shortly after. It wasn't dramatic. No courtroom shouting. No public meltdown. Just paperwork and signatures and the quiet death of something that should have never been built on manipulation in the first place. One evening, weeks later, Ethan stood in my kitchen while I chopped vegetables. I'm scared, he admitted suddenly. Of what? I asked. Of ending up with someone like her again. I set the knife down and looked at him. That fear will keep you sharp if you don't let it make you small. He nodded slowly. You don't need someone who completes you, I added. You need someone who doesn't try to rewrite you. That stuck. Spring crept in gently. The oak tree bloomed again. I planted new flowers along the fence, bright ones, loud ones, the kind that don't apologize for taking up space. People asked me if I regretted how things went down. I didn't. I regretted the pain. I regretted the years Ethan spent doubting himself. But I didn't regret drawing the line. Because here's the truth, nobody tells older women. If you don't protect your boundaries, people will call it selfish when you finally do. And I was done caring about that. One afternoon, Ethan brought over a box. What's this? I asked. He opened it and pulled out the designer wallet I'd given Kendra. She left it behind, he said. Figured it belonged to you. I laughed softly and waved it away. Donate it. Really, really. Because I didn't want reminders of who tried to take from me. I wanted reminders of who stayed. That night, after Ethan left, I sat alone on the porch with a glass of iced tea, listening to the cicadas start up like they always do when the weather warms. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and no one was circling it anymore, measuring, calculating, planning how to carve it up. Sometimes, payback isn't about revenge. Sometimes it's about reclaiming your space so completely that the people who tried to invade it have nowhere left to stand. By summer, things looked normal again from the outside. That's always the funny part. How chaos leaves no visible fingerprints once it's done wrecking your insides. The lawn stayed trimmed. The porch swing creaked the same way it always had. People driving past my house had no clue that just months earlier, this place had almost been turned into a bargaining chip in someone else's marriage strategy. But inside was different. Ethan had changed. Not in some dramatic movie-style way. No speeches, no overnight transformation. Just small, quiet shifts that only a mother would notice. He spoke slower, thought longer before answering. Asked questions instead of defending himself right away. The first time he said, "I need to think about that," instead of rushing to please someone. I almost smiled into my coffee. Almost. He started helping around the house again. Fixing things he used to ignore. Replacing a loose step. Cleaning out the garage with a seriousness that told me he was really cleaning out his head. One afternoon, while we were sorting old boxes, he pulled out a photo of his father holding him as a baby. I forgot how solid he felt. Ethan said quietly, "Your dad believed in foundations." I replied, "People, homes, promises. All of it." Ethan nodded. I think that's what scared her. I didn't ask who her was. I already knew. Around that same time, Kendra resurfaced in a new way. Not directly. Through mutual friends. That's how manipulators pivot when direct control fails. They outsource the pressure. I started getting messages that began with, "I don't want to get involved, but," which is always a lie. One woman suggested I be the bigger person. Another hinted that maybe I'd misread things. Someone even said, "She's really struggling, Marilyn." I replied to none of them. Because here's a lesson you learn late in life. People who ask you to be the bigger person usually benefit from you shrinking. Ethan, meanwhile, was finally angry. Not explosive anger. Focused anger. The kind that comes when denial wears off and reality settles in. "She's telling people you manipulated me," he said one evening, pacing my living room. "That you staged everything. And how does that make you feel?" I asked. "Like I let it happen," he admitted. "Like I handed her the microphone." I nodded. "Anger is fine. Just don't let it turn into shame. Shame keeps you quiet. And quiet people get used." That one stuck too. Then came the unexpected knock. Late August, hot evening, sun just dipping low. I opened the door and found a woman I didn't recognize at first. Late 30s, tired eyes. Nervous posture. "Are you Marilyn Hayes?" she asked. "Yes," she swallowed. "My name is Tessa. I was married to Kendra's brother." That stopped me cold. "May I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. Tessa sat stiffly on my couch, hands clasped. She told me her story in fragments at first, like she was afraid saying it out loud would make it real again. How Kendra had helped them manage finances. How decisions slowly stopped being joint. How documents appeared already signed. How family pressure was framed as concern. "She doesn't yell," Tessa said. "She just rearranges reality." I exhaled slowly. "You're not the first person to tell me that." Tessa's eyes filled. "I thought it was just me." "No," I said gently. "It never is." She didn't want revenge. She didn't want money. She wanted validation. She wanted to know she wasn't crazy. I gave her that. And something else happened in that moment. Something I didn't expect. I stopped feeling like a victim. Because patterns connect dots. And once you see the whole picture, fear loses its grip. Tessa left lighter than she arrived. I sat alone afterward, thinking, Kendra hadn't just targeted me. She'd perfected a system. And systems only survive when no one compares notes. That night, I told Ethan everything. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said quietly, "She was never going to stop." "No," I agreed. "She just would have moved on to the next source." He clenched his jaw. "I want to do something." "Do what?" Make sure she doesn't do this again. I studied him. That urge can turn noble or reckless real fast. Which one are you aiming for? Noble, he said after a beat. Then start with yourself, I said. Heal properly, learn, talk. Don't rush into crusades. He nodded. Okay. But I could tell the seed was planted. Fall came early that year. Cooler nights. Quieter mornings. I found myself enjoying my routines again. Walking the block at dusk. Reading without checking my phone. Cooking meals that weren't designed to impress anyone. One evening, Ethan sat across from me and said, I want to sell the Lexus. I raised an eyebrow. Why? It feels like part of that time, he said. I don't want reminders tied to pressure. That's fair, I replied. I'll give the money back to you. No, I said immediately. Use it to build something clean. Something that's yours. He smiled, small but real. By October, the gossip dried up. People moved on to the next mess. They always do. Kendra faded into background noise, but not completely. Because just when I thought the chapter was closing, my lawyer called again. Marilyn, she said, cautious. Kendra's name came up in another inquiry. I closed my eyes. Different county, she continued. Different family. Same tactics. I felt something settle in my chest. Not dread. Resolve. Do they know? I asked. They're just starting to, she said. And they're asking questions. I looked around my living room. At the photos, the solid furniture. The life that stayed standing because I didn't give in. Give them my number, I said. Because maybe my role in all of this wasn't just to survive it. Maybe it was to make sure the pattern didn't keep repeating unchecked. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of the story. It was the moment it widened. When my lawyer said, they're asking questions, I didn't answer right away. I stood at my kitchen window, watching the oak tree sway like it always had, roots deep, branches wide, unbothered by who came and went beneath it. That tree had outlived storms, droughts, and one lightning strike that should have split it in half but didn't. Funny how nature teaches lessons without ever raising its voice. Give them my number, I repeated. And just like that, the story stopped being only about me. The first call came a week later. A woman named Claire, mid-40s, shaky voice. She didn't introduce herself with a neat summary. She started with an apology. I don't know if I should even be calling you, she said. I feel stupid. That word again. I cut her off gently. You're not stupid. You're early. She went quiet. Then she cried. Claire told me about her sister-in-law, different name, same patterns. Financial help, emotional framing, slow isolation. The way concern always somehow led to paperwork. The way every objection turned into, why are you being so negative? I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't fix when she finished. I said, you're seeing it now, because you're ready to see it. That's not weakness. That's timing. By the time I hung up, I realized something important. Kendra wasn't special. She was practiced, and that meant she wasn't invincible. Over the next month, 3 more women reached out. All different lives. All the same quiet erosion. And every single one of them thought they were the problem until they weren't. I didn't become a crusader. I didn't start a group or a podcast or a dramatic takedown campaign. That's not my style. What I did was simpler. I told the truth. Calmly, clearly, with receipts. Patterns don't survive daylight. Ethan watched all of this from a respectful distance. He didn't insert himself. Didn't try to make up for anything. That alone told me he was healing the right way. One evening, he said, you know she's going to blame you for all of this. I shrugged. She already does. But it doesn't bother you. I thought about it for a moment. It did. Back when I needed her approval to feel right. I don't anymore. That's when I knew I'd crossed the real finish line. Not when Kendra left. Not when Ethan woke up. But when someone else's anger stopped deciding how I felt about my own choices. By winter, the house felt lighter. Not emptier. Lighter. I rearranged the living room. Not because I needed a fresh start, but because I wanted the couch closer to the window where the afternoon sun comes in. I donated things I'd kept out of habit, not attachment. I kept the things that carried weight. Ethan started dating again. Slowly, carefully. No rush to define anything. One night he said, I ask myself now, would my life get smaller with this person? I smiled. That's a good question. And another one, he added. Would my mom feel erased? That one hit me harder than I expected. Your relationships don't need my approval, I said. I know, he replied, but I trust your instincts now. I didn't say it out loud, but I trusted his again too. As for Kendra, she drifted. New circles, new narratives. News stories where she was always misunderstood, always generous, always the one who gave too much. People like her don't stop, they just move. But here's the part that matters. She didn't move through us anymore. No access, no leverage, no confusion to exploit. One afternoon, months later, I found Ethan standing in the doorway of the living room, holding that old envelope. The one you gave me, he said. I remember. I kept it, he said. Not because it hurt, because it reminded me that love can be firm. I stood up and hugged him, and this time there was no tension in it. No apology trying to sneak in. Just connection. Later that night, after he left, I sat alone in my chair again. Same chair, same house, same life. But I wasn't the same woman. I'd learned that being kind doesn't require being accessible. That family loyalty doesn't mean the erasure. That age doesn't soften your power, it sharpens it if you let it. And most of all, I learned this. Payback isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like peace that can't be negotiated away. Sometimes it's boundaries that hold even when guilt knocks. Sometimes it's simply standing your ground long enough for the truth to catch up. They tried to turn my home into leverage. They tried to turn my love into a weakness. They thought time had made me tired. They were wrong. Time had made me precise, and I stayed exactly where I belonged. If this story made you pause, think, or see something differently, tell us in the comments. Have you ever had to protect your boundaries from the people closest to you? Like the video if you believe strength doesn't disappear with age. Subscribe to Payback Files Stories, because here, every story ends with payback. And turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one. Disclaimer: this story is fictional and created for entertainment purposes only. All characters, events, and situations are imaginary. Any resemblance to real people or real events is purely coincidental.